Hello, welcome to the Freckled Cottage. If you're new here, welcome new friend. My name is Sharee and I'm the owner and creator here at the Freckled Cottage. I love to thrift, flip, and make discarded items wanted again. Sometimes I place them into my booth and sometimes I keep them for my own decor. In today's video, we're putting IOD's Candy Cane Cottage transfer set to work. I have these 3 items that I've acquired either at flea markets, auctions, or garage sales. This transfer set is so amazing. I'm sure we can take these blah items and transform them into gorgeous Christmas decor. Let's get started. Item number 1 is this round paper box that was in a lot that I won at an incredible auction that I attended this past summer. I probably paid the equivalent of about 50 cents or less for it. I'll link the video of that auction at the end of this video. I got started by giving it a quick clean and removing the ropes that were attached to it. I followed that by getting out DIY's Moulds Garden and giving the entire piece a single coat and then just a touch up on a few spots. I selected this lovely half-sheet floral from the transfer book and trimmed it to fit inside the parameters of the box. As with all IOD transfers, it came with this plastic transfer stick, and I got to work adhering the floral transfer to the box. I then cut out a small circle of the backing and burnished the transfer. It's important to do this so that you know the transfer is fully adhered and that no part of it will get pulled up. Next, I got out DIY's black velvet and used a small flat artist brush to paint the brim of the lid of the box. Once that was painted, I wanted to utilize Big Top to seal that in. Sometimes Big Top can dry a little bit cloudy, and I've learned that when used on dark paint, it helps to mix in a drop of the paint to the amount of Big Top that you would intend to use. So I added a little drop of the paint to a little pool of the Big Top and got to work putting that on the rim of the lid. Once that was dry, I got out DIY's Wax and Clear and used my clear wax brush to put a full coat all over the entire box and transfer. The reason that I used Big Top on the lid rim and wax on the rest of the box is that I didn't feel like Big Top was a great option for the main box, mainly because of the sheen. I wanted a more matte feel on the box itself. I also didn't want any of the black paint to bleed into the Moulds Garden when I was waxing, and this is the main reason I used Big Top on the lid rim. Item number 2 is this ornate oval frame that I got at a flea market last spring. It was right at the entrance first thing when it opened, so I snatched it up for $5. The base is wood, so it has great bones. I wanted the base color to be something a lot darker than the faded gold finish that came on the frame, so I got out DIY's liquid patina in the color Dark and Decrepit. I was going to be distressing back to this base color, so this was an important step. This product has top coat in it, so I knew that any distressing would not get past it. I felt like the one coat wasn't quite dark enough, so I did end up giving it 2 full coats of the Dark and Decrepit. The next layer I decided would be DIY's Sandy Blonde. I gave it 1 full coat and was careful to get into all of the details. This perfectionist brush, also from DIY, made this step pretty easy. I tell ya, using the right tools makes a huge difference. Once that was dry, I used wet wipes to distress the sandy blonde back to the dark base. If you don't have or don't want to use wet wipes, feel free to just use a damp cloth. Either way works great. As you can see, I'm wiping back the sandy blonde off of the high points of the detail, being careful not to take too much off. I wanted just the right amount of the darkened carpet to show through. After using my heat gun to dry that off quick, I got out the big top again and put one full coat on the entire piece. I have this little container here that I pour a small amount of big top into, so there's less of a chance of contaminating the big container. I call this my dirty big top. Monet's Garden is the star of the show this week. For this layer, I absolutely did not want full coverage, so I used a sweeping motion to hit all of the high points and leave most or all of the low points and crevices untouched. I'm just loving how this is coming along so far. Again, once dry, I used wet wipes to wipe some of that green off of the high points and give it a good wet distressing. That's one of the things that is so awesome about DIY paints. They are so incredibly easy to wet distress. That means I don't have to take my piece outside or make a big sanding mess in my workshop. Then it was time to wax, and you guessed it, I got out DIY's Wax and Clear. Hey, it's my favorite. After putting a good even coat of clear wax on, next up is the dark wax. On pieces like this, I really like to add back in a little bit of grunge, as if I had just found this in the back of a barn, but without the ick factor. I use a cheap stencil brush for this, and I'm careful to work it into the deepest crevices. Then I wipe it back with a dry paper towel. Now, this frame did not come with a backing, so I was going to need to build my own. I laid the frame down on a large piece of cardboard and traced out the oval. I then drew a parallel line about 3/4 of an inch outside of that so that the backing would sit in the groove. The mixed media art that I had planned on putting in the frame was also going to need a good thick base, so I decided to just connect it to the cardboard backing. I used mat board and traced out a duplicate shape. My plan was to start with decoupage, so I wanted to ensure that I had a good base for that. When I need to paint something white, but the quality of the paint doesn't really matter, I like to use this cheap white paint from Walmart. it does the trick nicely. The next step was to attach the two. In retrospect, I wish I had attached them before I painted it, just because the paint drying caused it to bow a little bit, which made it a little more difficult to glue them together. I used regular old Mod Podge to glue the pieces together, and then placed a few heavy things on top and left it overnight to dry and flatten out a little bit. The next day, I gathered the mixed media items that I decided to use. This recycled paper called Neutral Christmas Masterboard, this cute Santa transfer from IOD's Candy Cane Cottage, and the large tree and star from the IOD Oh Christmas Tree mold. First, I selected areas from the paper that I wanted to use and got to work cutting them out. I used the wet brush method, which lends to natural soft lines rather than harsh cut lines made by a scissor. Next, I was going to need the tree and the star. I wanted to use resin rather than clay because I wanted to ensure that they would sit ultra flat on the board. I also didn't want to wait for the clay to dry. So I used the amazing casting resin. If you've never tried it before, it's really easy and truly amazing because it sets up so fast. Also, if clay castings crack on you when they dry, the resin eliminates that problem as well. I will include links below in case you're interested in giving the amazing casting resin a go. The IOD molds indicate right on the mold there exactly how much resin you would need to pour for each casting. So for the tree, it indicates that I needed 61 milliliters for the tree, and for the star, 7 milliliters. So I was going to need about 70 milliliters total of mixed resin. The cups that come with the resin don't hold that much resin, so I'm using these little silicone pouring cups. The Amazon link to purchase these is also down below in the description. They have measurements on the sides, so they were really easy to use and made the job of pouring the resin much easier than the plastic cups that come with the resin kit. So as per the directions, I mixed equal parts A and part B. To my math, that came to about 35 milliliters of each. Then I mixed the concoction with the stir stick for 30 seconds and not much longer than that. I've learned in the past that 60 seconds is way too long as it starts to set up in the cup and becomes very hard to pour. Once I have it all poured out, I use the stir stick to push the resin liquid into all of the far nooks and crannies of the tree mold. Look, before I even finish doing so, it's starting to heat up and set up from the middle outward. This is a big mold, and the bigger they are, the quicker they generate heat and start to turn. I set that aside to finish setting up and get to work with the background. Today I'm using my favorite decoupage medium, DIY's Clear Liquid Patina. I like the starter strip method for the decoupage and try to remember to mist the paper before laying it down, although I do not always remember. Misting the paper does help reduce wrinkles in the paper, so it's super helpful when I don't forget. You'll notice that I'm not going for full coverage on the board here. That's because the gaps will eventually be filled, and you'll see that in steps to come. Also, I wish I had been using a larger brush and more product. I tend to be a little conservative and thin with my decoupage medium usage, and I'm finding that it's starting to dry before I can even lay the section of paper all the way down. At this point, it's been about a half hour since I poured the resin, so I'm super curious how this big resin cast came out, so let's check it out. Wow, it came out great. I am loving this. I'm ready to get it painted, and I'm gonna go again with the Monet's Garden color and again with the DIY Perfectionist brush. It really is fantastic at getting into all of the detail in this casting. Even so, it did take some time, so I can only imagine how painstaking this would be with a regular brush. I finished up the decoupage off camera and let it sit to dry for a couple hours. Later on, I came back in and sanded all of the edges off with this little finger sander. The Amazon link to this is also listed below in the description. For the next step, I'm going to fill in those gaps between the decoupage sections and give the piece some texture. The colors that I picked out to complement the tones in the paper are DIY's Tarnished Pearl, DIY's Crinoline, and Waverly's Mineral. I also get out Dixie Belle's Sea Spray texture powder. I have this old angled bristle brush that I'm using for this, and I just use it to quickly mix the texture powder into each pool of paint as I go. I'm just using stippling motions to get this applied in places where there are gaps in the paper, and trying to make it look like natural stone texture, perhaps. Once finished with each color, I left it to dry overnight. Next, it was time to attach the tree to the board, and for this I chose, of course, my favorite Titebond Quick and Thick. The link for that is also listed below if you need to pick some up. I don't want the glue to glop out from behind the tree, so I'm careful to use my finger to spread the glue out into an even layer, and ensuring that all points of the tree are adhered to the backing. Next, it's time to apply the Santa transfer. This guy is so big, it's just absolutely perfect for this project. I really love how IOD packs their transfer sets with truly applicable and versatile images. I'm not sure what this method is actually called, but for large placement-dependent transfers, it works really well. I fold down and crease the backing of just a portion of the transfer, in this case Santa's head, and this allows me to place the transfer exactly where I want it without committing to placement until it's just right. I adhere the small portion with a transfer stick, then fold the whole thing back, remove the backing sheet, and carefully roll down the remainder of the transfer. Works like a charm. For this project, I'm especially careful to burnish with great caution. This background is pretty textured at this point, and the transfer isn't fully adhered around the texture, so it would be really easy to catch a loose piece and rip the transfer. I didn't rush this one. Next, I wanted to apply some snow, so I got out DIY's White Swan and a chip brush to do some dry brushing on the tree, and also stippling some in around the textured areas to blend those in a little bit more. And finally, it's time to seal the whole thing up. And for that, I simply grabbed the DIY Wax in Clear. As a finishing touch, I wanted to add a little zing, so I got out the Golden Rule Gilding Wax by DIY and used my fingertip, proceeding to hit the high points of the tree and a bit of the texture. The tree was protruding from the oval a little bit, so I used an X-Acto knife to trim it off so that it would fit into the groove on the back of the frame. time to frame it up. Now, I was expecting this part to be a lot harder than it was, but nailing into the frame was surprisingly easy, and I put about 8 nails in at even intervals around the frame. Once it was finally framed up, it was time for finishing touches, so I got out the golden rule again to hit all the high points and details on the frame. I am so thrilled with how this one turned out. Look at all that detail, and you just never know how a mixed media project's going to come out, and this one I'm just so happy with. Item number 3 is this bright orange frame that I got at a garage sale. It was one of 4 frames that all came together in a canvas bin, take all for $5, so overall it costed me about $1. I got started by quickly cleaning it up with wet wipes, some water, and a toothbrush to grab the dust from inside the nooks and crannies. This orange color looked to be one that would be hard to cover, so I broke out the Boss Stain Blocking Primer by Dixie Belle to save an extra coat, or 2, of paint. I wanted the base color to be white, so I used a good coat and a half of White Swan followed by Big Top to seal it all in. For the next layer, I wanted a nice Christmas red, so I chose DIY's Marquee. This red has really good coverage, so it only required a coat and a half. Once that was dry, I went in with wet wipes to wet distress back the high points of the marquee. This is why I used the Big Top. Had I not, the red and white paints would be mixing and creating pink, which wasn't what I'm after. I did some touch-ups to the edges off camera, dried it quickly with a heat gun, and then applied a coat of the Big Top. I then left it overnight to dry thoroughly. All along, I'd been planning to apply this Grandma Kringle's Candy Cane Transfer, so I got to work getting it applied. I used the middle last technique on this transfer for sure, to make sure that I didn't miss any of the details. I put a good coat of clear wax on the entire piece and then got out Dixie Belle's wax in black. I worked that into all the crevices and details and then wiped back the excess with a dry paper towel. I just love how this is turning out, but the inside of that frame is looking a little too clean and white, so I applied some of the black wax to the edges around that as well. The clear wax I applied previously helps to move the black wax around and acts as an eraser where I need it to. I want it to look aged without it looking too dirty. And there you have it. I had a lot of fun creating with the Candy Cane Cottage transfers and turning these discarded items into beautiful Christmas decor. I know that this transfer is primarily sold out, but if you have it already, I hope these projects have inspired you to use them. All of these completed items are available for sale in my booth at the Rustic Depot Market in Princeton, Minnesota. If you're not local, feel free to email me or DM me on Instagram. I will have the depot send you an invoice and set up shipping. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked today's video, be sure to give it a big thumbs up. And if you have like-minded friends, be sure to share it out. Check out previous content and also subscribe and comment to support my new channel. Oh, and turn notifications on to ensure you're notified every time a new video is uploaded. Find time to create, and see you next time.